Yesterday, our 4GM group managed to continue its exploration of All for One Regime Diabolique, the Ubiquity-powered Musketeers-based game of supernatural swashbuckling horror. This session was run by JDRD30, Francois Latard. You can see his channel. Look for JDRD30. He posts videos both in French and English. And it was his turn to take over. Now, this was the first time that we have run a session where everything took place in Paris. And that was very cool. When he was first teasing the setup for us, I was thinking, yes, this is a great idea. In the session that I ran, we looked at how sometimes the Musketeers are sent on missions as, trusted agents of the king. Things we see happening in the source material of, Dumas' Three Musketeers. We see them being sent off to do stuff. And likewise in Sebastian's Null Inquisitor's session, we're sent off as an escort for someone the king wanted protected. But in this case, we are actually doing our regular day-to-day job. The king is meeting another head of state, and we have to guard him, because at the end of the day is what a musketeer really is. So, we are protecting the Louvre, but there's this new challenge that he's presented us with. This is seen to be such an important visit that the Cardinal's Guard will also be present. And to stick it to us just a little bit, they're working inside the palace, and we, the Musketeers, are outside the palace as a visible reminder of the power of the king, which is great if you're the king, but considering it was raining, it's not so great if you're a musketeer. But one musketeer, Francois' character, is taken out of the action by being placed inside to, again, continue the almost delicious rivalry which is starting to develop between the four characters. So this is how our session begins. The three of us, Philippe, Jean-Marie, and my character, Martin, are outside in the rain, not really expecting anything to happen. It's an important visit by a head of state, but it's business as usual also. It's the routine part of our job. So, of course, everything goes awry. Now, as part of this experiment, after each session, what we're doing is recording recaps mingled with commentary, or we are doing in-character recaps, or both, as mood and time takes us. So if you go to my channel and the other channels, you'll find an All for One playlist, and you can go through and see the sessions play out, and then the commentary from each person involved with it about what's going on. This is our way of exploring the game. So for me, what it's like to share it, see how quickly the others are adapting to it, getting greater senses of who the individual characters are, or how the story elements were perceived, and so on and so forth. We don't have a lot of time to play. We don't know how much more beyond the 4 sessions we'll be able to do. And so this is a way for us to use our individual time and our group time to best advantage to really, get into the meat of this game. So you'll find that the videos in this series, or the videos in this playlist, are very different. They're coming from very different perspectives. Each player has their own different background, their own different perceptions of exactly what the genre is, and we are working toward creating that group cohesion that supports a vibrant and sustainable campaign. Everybody involved is a long-term game master, And player has a real attachment to the genre and is interested in the system. Some of us have played it more than others. Some of us hadn't played it at all, and I have to learn right now as we go. And that's been one of the more interesting parts for me, is seeing how the game is propagating or spreading out through the group of GMs and what questions they ask, showing me how the system feels in play from the player side, and then they make the shift over to the game master side and have to read the rules again from that perspective. It's been interesting. But the session opens up with the 3 characters that we are playing outside the Louvre, which at this period in history was King Louis XIII's palace in Paris. We're outside, and we were able to choose our own duty assignment, our own position. And so Jean-Marie, our monster hunter, he goes toward the park, and I, seeking glory through the vehicle of Martin, am as close to the gate as I can get, so I can be seen fulfilling the duty. Who's that musketeer? That kind of thing. And Philippe, being famous and renowned, is also there. He's stationed between us, able to lend his blade and his speed and youthful strength to whomever needs it. This is a pretty good setup for the beginning of things, and there are lots of people making their way in with their invitations to this political function. So we encounter old rivals from the past, from the session that I ran, which is neat. It's neat to see these characters portrayed by someone who perceived them as a player, and then we resist the temptation to get into it with them. And then someone from Martin's past appears, and triggering my character's flaw. He's hunted by his family and his motivation. He's seeking revenge against his family. Is he able to resist? He's able to resist messing with him personally, but not able to resist messing with him and sending Philippe off, and then regretting it. And this was a fun scene for me, because this cousin, very well-to-do, obviously wealthy, summoned to be one of the representatives of France at this very important function with a foreign dignitary, and here this man is filling the role for my family when it should be me. I mean, imagine the bitterness and frustration and anger of this. But first and foremost, being a musketeer there to do their duty to the crown. His own personal revenge will take second place to his duty to the crown, at least this time. But that doesn't mean he has to let this slight, this insult, go. And so he sends Philippe over to hassle the man on the way in and make him look suspicious, make him have a difficult time getting into the ball. And then as soon as Philippe goes over there, and it's kind of like a fish out of water, like, how do I stop this guy? And he's being his usual, not insulting, but just naive and enthusiastic self as he's doing his duties, helping his friend Martin to slow this guy down. And the Cardinal's guards, who are responsible for letting people into the Louvre or not, are growing suspicious. And Philippe is running out of questions to ask, and Martin, looking on, is starting to feel guilty. But just at this moment, at this very moment, something suspicious is happening higher up in the palace, and Jean-Marie has noticed it, and he comes over to Martin to let us know that crows, big crows, are working their way into the building through an open window, and that window leads into the Queen's chamber. So all thoughts of everything are thrown aside, right? Our duty takes precedence, and there are many ways we could have handled this, some of which would involve actually speaking to the Cardinal's guards like we're supposed to, but no, we're musketeers, we're men of action. And so I try to interrupt Jean-Marie and say, look, I've gotten Philippe into trouble, let's rescue him first. He says, oh no, he's fine. And then we rush in to save the queen, for the queen, and off we go. And Philippe follows in our wake. We have, a tussle with the Cardinals' guards, which we eventually smooth over because we do have our duty on our side. An obvious urgency in our bearing, but not without trying to send Philippe up the side of the palace. There's always that little dig or way to put a spin on things. So Jean-Marie and Martin have every intention of going up the stairs, up the servant stairs, to get to the queen's quarters. But we send youthful Philippe trying to climb up the side of the palace to get there faster. And, of course, Francois made sure that if he was successful in this challenge, he would get there faster and he would have the opportunity for the glory. So that made it fun and made the encounter with the Cardinals guards inside on the servant stairs even more frustrating, because what if Philippe gets there first? So that was pretty cool. Now, before we find out what happens to Philippe and the wall and the bush, I think it's time to interject just a little bit about magic. In the previous scenario, we saw Martin, who had just been called back to active duty, really, and with the help of Monsieur de Treville adopting this new persona, this Martin persona, in the Musketeers. He has been on the run. He has been unable to catch a breath for a very long time. And so we see Martin as he is. He hasn't had time to kind of reconnect fully with his faith. He's been out in the field fighting against members of his own family. So there are instances in the session run by Sebastian where he tries to draw upon his mystical abilities, his magical abilities, or what he sees of as his ability to work miracles, and doesn't have time, or there's implications that he's using it in the background and it's successful, but for the most part we don't get to see Martin fully recharged with the Holy Spirit. Now, one thing that we had discussed with Francois before the session started was being able to do that. That notification of the ball gave us time to prepare, and one thing that magic requires in this game is time to prepare. And so Martin in this session is enhanced by, again, what he sees as the Holy Spirit. And I took some time to augment, or to bless, the damage capacity of his weapon, so it would inflict more damage. And in Ubiquity, that means making his die pool to hit and do damage larger. In Ubiquity, the whole concept expressed is your potential to do damage, which includes having to hit in the first place. So the damage capacity of the weapon, plus your skill using the weapon, plus your base attribute, all combined to make your pool. So he was quite effective as a fighter in this scene, or in this session. I also enhanced his empathy. He had asked for greater insight into his fellow human beings, to pierce the eyes of deception, because they were on guard duty. They were looking for assassins and people sneaking in that shouldn't be there. And he enhanced his body attribute, which informs things like the amount of health you have, the number of wounds that you can take, and boosts your defense. So he enhanced himself for fitness. He opened his mind to the way people are. He asked for insight. And if violence was necessary, he asked for blessings on his blade. And that's how we had Martin begin this particular session. And these benefits will last for 3 days because it was conducted as a ritual. He spent a long time in prayer, in confession, and reaching a place where he could call down these energies and focus them on doing his duty. So this is a Martin more like how Martin sees himself and less like how he actually is. But a funny comment from Ivan was that this is just Martin finally showing up, being able to keep up with the others, because as we know, Philippe is an extremely youthful, ebullient, and physical guy. And the idea of scaling the side of a palace, why wouldn't I be able to do that? And it just makes me laugh every time I think about it. Anyway, despite all his great ability, Philippe is not successful climbing the side of the palace, and then has to follow us. He's a beat behind us on the stairs. We hit the queen's chambers, and he's hitting the bottom of the stairs, kind of thing. So we've, through force of personality and duty, have gotten past the cardinal's guards in the stairwell. He bulls through them like a bull in a china shop, which is a theme which will be repeated several times throughout the scenario, which is funny. So we get into the queen's chambers, and it's filled with crows. There's a whole murder of crows filling the air, flying about. The queen is screaming for help. Her servants are running around, and so we charge in, for the queen, and draw steel and begin cutting our way through the flying birds, and Martin makes it to the side of the queen. And how is he going to protect her? I mean, the birds are everywhere, and our weapons are really inadequate for the purpose. The birds are all around us, and the rules for such things in Ubiquity, the swarm rules, are nice and fast, and they represent this level of challenge. Sure, you can take out individual members of this swarm or flock or whatever it is, this large group of creatures that's attacking you all at once, but that doesn't do much in the moment to reduce the effect of that swarm or group of creatures against you. It takes time to disperse them, scare them off, or whatever. So these big birds are attacking, and they are enough of a threat. They're tearing it closed, they're tearing up the room, they're smashing into things. It's disorienting and confusing and very frightening for the occupants of the room to suddenly be bombarded by all of these, black flying things, and there's feathers in the air. So what is he going to do? So she's next to her bed, her big 4-poster bed with a canopy and heavy drapes to keep her warm. And that's when he has the idea, and calling on the concept of brise-cour. And when the lady was in peril, he threw her under the bed. Martin does the same. He apologizes first, but pushes the queen onto the bed. And then with his rapier, he cuts the ropes that are holding the drapes up and the canopy up, and these things drop down over the queen, protecting her from the birds, or that's his hope. And then he goes into action to try and drive them back out the window. Jean-Marie has been doing that the whole time, taking out the birds, cursing a blue streak, apologizing for doing so, and then trying to get them out the window. But as we're beginning to turn the tide and get the birds out, Philippe comes crashing in. He's going to help, and we notice that one of the birds is carrying something in its beak, and it's trying to make its way out the window. So suddenly we have to stop trying to drive them out the window. Our decision to do so was the wrong one. I love how Francois kept us on our toes all the time. This is great. Let's hurl ourselves into it, wholeheartedly. Whoa, wait, that's the wrong idea. We got to go this way. So that, gave us lots of energy in every scene. And so now we've got to stop this one bird. So I take off my hat, and I'm trying to deal with it, and Philippe tears off his musketeer's tabard and tries to deal with it, and we are unsuccessful. It gets out the window. Well, that doesn't stop anybody. So Philippe goes out the window, riding the big heavy drapes down, and Jean-Marie is right after him. Of course, 2 in a row. It breaks, and so he falls part of the way, and Martin considers it. But the queen is still here in need of protection. There's still birds in the room, and he stays to make sure she is safe, and of course to further his own goals. He's still in the back of his mind. He's thinking, he's stewing over this cousin has entered the ball, and there's nothing he can do about it. There's absolutely nothing he can do about it right now, except maybe gain the favor of the queen. So this fantastic chase scene starts up, and it just keeps getting better. We've got someone mysterious, cloaked, and bearing a staff is underneath the tree where this all began, where Jean-Marie was originally hiding in this group of trees in this park in front of the Louvre. this is where the birds first gathered before breaking into the palace, and so this is where they return and they deliver their stolen item to this mysterious person, who takes off like a shot, with Philippe hot on their heels, and then Jean-Marie feeling like he's falling behind. And Jean-Marie's had a rough week while we were off, relaxing at the front. He was hunting witches in the streets of Paris, and so he's still tired and exhausted. And so instead of running down the street after Philippe, he steals this ornate, government carriage. This is one of the carriages from the delegation from Sweden. And off he goes. Just, chucks the guard off the top and is ripping down the street with his stolen carriage. So, the images of this are in my mind. We're all laughing. And they chase them down, and there's a rooftop battle with Philippe, and Jean-Marie catches up, and they lose sight of the person. The person escapes in the confusion of the streets, but leaving a blood trail, and Jean-Marie is a tracker, and so they track the villain to the Seine. And we had our usual comments about the freshness of the water of the Seine, but we wind up on Pont Neuf, which is another in-joke in our group. The one place that we should avoid, because it's a place of dueling, is this particular bridge, and so of course it's the one place we hope to wind up, and that's exactly where we wind up, is there. And this person has escaped somehow by leaping over the rail, and all kinds of Parisians are freaking out, like, "Oh, musketeers, you should help." And so they dive into the filthy waters of the Seine, still seeking the trail. But meanwhile, back in the palace, Martin is dealing with the queen, and what was stolen, always keeping his eye on the prize. And what's the prize here? Personal glory through competence. So what was stolen? He's not going to be able to chase it down and get it back, so what was it, in case we can recover it later? And this was something that Francois did that was really cool. Rather than just give us an information dump, he kept the action moving. So he suddenly cast us all in different roles. We're members of the Queen's entourage, and we play through a scene where the item was given to the Queen. This is pretty cool. So we discover that it's this small wooden item with a blue dot in the middle. In shape and size, it's reminiscent of a coin, and it was described to us as being similar to what a child could do. So this gift is presented to the Queen through a returned captain who has been in New France. So in what is basically now northern New Brunswick and Quebec. He's been exploring these areas, or serving the crown in those areas, and he's come back, and he has brought with him some First Nations people. And there's a small girl, and she's going to be going to this convent here in Paris, but she is delivering this item to the Queen as a gift, and it's very important to her. In the flashback, we particularly see how important this is to her, that the Queen have this, and nobody in the scene understands what she's talking about. Scene ends. So now I'm back as Martin again. I've heard this story from the Queen about this emotional encounter, and what was stolen was this thing. Something that maybe from the Queen's perspective has no real value. It's not gold or jewels. It's not something that would be stolen. It's just this trinket, this item that she got from one of many foreign people who's been brought before her, but someone who made a lasting impression. And from this story, Martin learns the name of this girl. Now, we cut back to the chase, and they find the collapsed body of the person they've been pursuing. Philippe, of course, being as deadly as he is, managed to wound her. And she has made a valiant effort to escape, but blood loss and fatigue are contributing. She can't get away. So they summon a boatsman, and they get the body. She's hiding under the bridge and the pylons, and they get her into a boat, and they get themselves to shore. And they go back to the headquarters, the hotel of Monsieur de Treville. And this is where we all get back together again. But not before Martin has time to make an impression on the Cardinal. Cardinal Richelieu himself. This is really, on deadly ground for Martin. And he's, again, wanting to make this impression, seriously wanting to make this impression. And under the eye of the Cardinal, the very watchful and, at the beginning of the scene anyway, disapproving eye of the Cardinal, Martin apologizes once again for the delay in coming to her aid, and without saying anything about the tossing her under the bed part, apologizing for that as well, but then offers a prayer. So he prays with the Queen to demonstrate their thanks for having survived this mysterious encounter, all while the Cardinal is looking on. And there's a sense of, a real discerning and penetrating glance at the end, as this particular musketeer is marked. Marked for what? Who can say? It's definitely to his advantage to have the eye of the Cardinal, but also his disadvantage. Next to the king, there is no one in France more powerful. In fact, it could be argued that the Cardinal is, in real terms, more powerful than the king. Risky stuff. But, risky or not, undaunted, Martin makes sure to speak his name, to identify himself to the Queen in the hearing of the Cardinal, so that when this story is told, at least one of the musketeers can be referred to by name, and it will be his, one step forward toward his plan. But now, Francois is beginning to accelerate the pace. This has been kind of a feeling things out. What do you want to do? Look at this. There's something over here. Do you want to get involved in that? There's something over here. Do you want to get involved in that? And with each decision that we make, it begins to accelerate. So now the musketeers need to be brought together. Martin has uncovered what the stolen item is, or at least where it came from, and Philippe and Jean-Marie have captured the person who stole it and recovered the items. Now we come back together. We have the person who stole it. What will they tell us? We know that she's very, very tough. She stood up to Philippe and held her own, and then escaped and led them on this merry chase despite this heavy wound. We know that she's really not going to give in to persuasion, and so we needed to find some way to make her talk. Now, all around this scene, we have the lackeys in action. On Martin's way back to headquarters to hook up with the others, he had encountered Eugene, and she was terribly upset and was bearing a note. This was a note from Briscourt informing us that he had left the ball. He didn't want to be shown as being derelict in his duty, but he also wanted to boast that he was going off to this amazing like after party thing. And so Martin disregarded it, and honestly I missed some of the pieces of it, and it would become important later. So this was particularly fun for me to have gotten this particular clue very early on in the game and then need to be reminded of it later. I think that's always a good experience. So Briscourt is off at some other party, having been led there by a mysterious lady. And we have Luciano, the Italian doctor, working to save the thief. Jacques, of course, the drunkard, he stumbles through a few very important scenes. And we have Martin's lackey, Claude, the investigator or finder of secrets, who shows up at a couple of opportune moments to make sure that Martin has all of his mental ducks in a row. So, we have uncovered through all of this network of people some artifacts left behind at the scene of the crime. The idea that maybe this woman is connected to religion. Perhaps she is a nun or in some way working out of a convent based on the items that she left behind, like a rosary and her habit and things. So she's either posing as a nun or is one. And this connects to the story that the Queen told, and so Martin is starting to draw some dots. But, which convent? He has no idea. The Queen didn't know. And we still don't know. And in Briscour's note, to my defense, he doesn't say. But now we've had several links to convent. The idea is in there. So we need to get her to talk in some way. It's not going to be torture. It's not going to be persuasion. We don't have Briscour is going to win her over with his manly charm. So it means something else. And so without speaking to the others, without engaging them in the opportunity of choice, but as a player, I explain to the players what I want to do. Martin begins to work with the woman. So it looks like he's sitting down and he's praying with her. He's holding her hand and going through this litany of prayers, demonstrating his faithfulness and his friendliness and his willingness to listen. But what's actually happening is he is asking for a miracle, to open this woman's eyes to the truth, that she can see who is on the side of right, who is actually serving the divine here, and that she would reveal her secrets to make it possible for things to come out the way that they should. And he is, over time, successful in breaking through and causing this effect using his magical school that affects the body and mind. So she reveals enough information that we are able to begin to put together a plan. Then, of course, Monsieur de Treville comes in, and we have to win his approval for all of this. And in that distraction with the drunken Jacques also, the woman makes her escape. And we're chasing her down. And once again, she faces off with Philippe. But this time, she is the victor, clocking him on the side of the face with a broken piece of chair and knocking him out cold. We would give chase, but we're distracted by several things, the unconscious Philippe being one of them, and she escapes. We note the direction of her travel. We now know the name of the convent. It's something that we're going to be able to find anyway. It has a very peculiar name. It's basically devoted to St. George. And so, the idea of a convent dedicated to a saint renowned for dragon slaying definitely piques Martin's interest and the interest of the others. What are we going to do? But then Claude fortunately comes back in, and how can I be of service? And basically what he is a courtly spy. He serves Martin, and his job is to find secrets. And so Martin tells him everything, and the act of recounting everything brings up the letter again, and we reread through it, and we note, like more obviously this time, that Briscour has been taken to a convent with an amazing lady. Well, we've just seen an amazing lady, but we know it's not her. But we get a description of the amazing lady from Claude, and, well, they seem really familiar to me. And I make a deductive leap, or a leap of faith, and I think, well, what if they're sisters or twin sisters or something along these lines? And I send Claude off to investigate, and we move to the convent. And it's now deep, 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 deep night. Right? We got a bunch of men showing up to a convent saying, hey, let us in. We need to investigate. We need to talk to the Mother Superior, because the secrets revealed by the thief, the conspirator, whoever she is, while she was under Martin's magical influence, definitely and heavily implicated the Mother Superior of this now very peculiar convent. Like, what is going on with this place? So we show up. We have no real plan for how we're going to get in. We have no authority really for getting in, other than that we, serve the king. We are the king's musketeers. We're his elite. That should be enough. And if Briscour had been there, it would have been enough. It was his overconfidence and his skill in communicating with people somehow would have made it enough, but it's us, and we are more the blunt force trauma side of the group rather than the smooth as silk side of the group. And so that was interesting for me, playing Martin, who is definitely not a silver-tongued devil. He's used to being able to give orders and have them be obeyed because of position and rank. He hasn't had to actually earn his ability to command respect. Take away the title, and now you're a soldier in service to the king. This was a really cool role-playing experience for me. So I'm trying to command and talk my way into this convent, and I had to default on the law. I had to default to my skill with bureaucracy in order to get this woman to go talk to the Mother Superior. And they, of course, are under no particular compulsion to deal with such things with haste. So we're just outside cooling our heels, and they're inside trying to figure out what to do. It was really cool. And so enter Philippe climbing the walls. So he's going to try and get in through a window, and we have some fun with the idea of what would poor innocent young Philippe see through these windows in this convent. But his scrabbling and scratching around and the chaos that he causes brings heads out of windows, and Martin recognizes a First Nations girl, and he's thinking, this has to be Obequois. This has to be the girl from the story. And he calls her name, which is enough to begin an opening for us. And Philippe charges into the room where she is, and she's in terror. And the first thing he notices is that the window is open, but the door to the rest of the convent is blocked. She's hiding in here from them. She needs help, and he's trying to communicate with her that he is here to help. But before we can get involved in all of that, the two sisters come out, and we enter into some mental sparring. They want to take us to see the Mother Superior. The Mother Superior is not in the convent. She's in another part of the compound, this overgrown, chaotic garden in the back. And we're all very, very suspicious, but at the same time, these very willful women are reassuring us somehow that they're being honest with us, and they're being just honest enough with us that it's okay. We get into the garden, and Martin uncovers Briscour's hat. There's no way he would leave his hat here, and we know it's his because it bears his scent, the perfume of 1,000 women. And so, even though we're all very, very suspicious, it's still very easy to follow the lead of these two women. In retrospect, I find that particularly interesting. Not, pushing for an empathy role or investigation or looking for some way to see that they are lying to us or setting us up for something. They were convincing, and we let ourselves be convinced. They led us right into the center of this garden. Of course, in the garden, we find Briscour tied up like a sacrifice against this big tree. He's bound by vines, and he's unconscious. And then at his feet, there's the dried and partially eaten corpse of someone else. Well, what are we supposed to do? And he said, well, you have to defeat the Mother Superior. And this is true. Well, how do we do that? Well, you need to, get rid of the wooden coin. And it's like everything else has been true so far, and so we do. We toss the thing down into the center of the garden, and aha! Well, that was the mistake, which is fun. So now the enemy is revealed, and Mother Superior is indeed very superior. In fact, she bears the curse of the Wendigo. She has become this supernaturally infused cannibal. If you don't know the story of the Wendigo, look it up. It's pretty cool. So there she is, and she's going to feast on Briscour, but now she wants to feast on us. But she also wants that wooden medallion or coin. And we are locked in the battle of our lives. The garden is coming to life, and Philippe and Jean-Marie are bound up in vines. Martin narrowly escapes that fate, but he's now face to face fighting the Wendigo who cannot be harmed by any of the weapons that he's carrying. So we need to get back to this wooden coin, but we don't even know how to use it. Now we're starting to notice these similarities. The two women are fighting with these wooden staves, and the Wendigo also has a staff. And one side of one end of the staff bears a sigil very much like this wooden medallion. So maybe they want to put those medallions together. What effect that has, who knows? We're just trying to survive. So Jean-Marie still has his musket. He fires at the Wendigo. It's distracting, does no damage. I'm slashing and cutting and stabbing at the Wendigo. It does no damage. Philippe is bound up in vines, but he's able to reach Briscourt, so he frees him. Briscourt is being roused, and he's trying to give us whatever help he can by verbally distracting the opponents. And the fight goes on, and of course, telling the story, eventually we survive. We're able to deal with the Wendigo. The Wendigo, it turns out, has a vulnerability to silver in this particular instance. And we are not carrying much. Martin has a silver crucifix, and Jean-Marie has a silver knife with a very, very special purpose for ending the life of the werewolf which killed his son and sent him on this path. Now, we'll take a brief divergence before the end of the story to talk about a really, what I thought was powerful and interesting scene of roleplay between Jean-Marie or the character Jean-Marie and the character of Martin. While we were gearing up, and we actually had one of those gearing up montages to go to the convent of St. George, Martin and Jean-Marie are alone for a moment. The first real period of time they've had alone since they've come back from Stull in the session that I ran. A session in which Martin and Jean-Marie basically executed, for purposes of mercy, people who are transforming into werewolves and Martin's father, a black magician. They're both carrying this, and they're not talking about it to each other or anyone else. And Jean-Marie feels in some way responsible for the way they dealt with the scene, hacking the bodies apart as you're supposed to prevent them from rising again. But this is such terrible treatment of one's friend's father. And so he's saying, after I have completed my vengeance, I will submit myself to your mercy, but please give me the opportunity to go this far. And Martin is caught up in all for one and one for all, and he sees the opportunity for a uniting of purpose, and he reassures Jean-Marie, do not worry, when you kill the werewolf that took your son, I'll be right there with you. And there is forgiveness and understanding between the two men. And then we go on to fight the Wendigo, and it is a brutal battle. Philippe is battered and bashed, and he is the combat face of our group. He is the one that we turn to. As Martin often says, I'll be right behind you. So we are beginning to think, I think, as players and characters, that we are going to die. But the hint of silver gives us this glimmer of hope. So Martin forgets his sword, takes off his crucifix, wraps it around his fist, and wades into battle with the Wendigo who is nearing 8 feet in height. And Jean-Marie is using his dagger, and he throws it, and the silver is burning, and Philippe gets himself free, grabs the dagger in the body of the Wendigo, and he's just wreaking massive damage, and Martin is wailing on it with the silver crucifix, and working together they bring it down. Now, play had gone on for over 3 hours, and 2 of us had to go. So we had to, unfortunately, do a very quick wrap-up. But it turns out that we call for Monsieur de Treville. We reveal everything that happened. We were required to give a report, on his desk by dawn. So we give the report. This is what we've uncovered. These are the terrible secrets that were going on. This is what we protected the queen from. We're very sorry for all the offense. We're heartily sorry for having offended thee. This is what was happening. And so the innocent are separated from the convent. The convent itself is torched, and we come away with a diary, and Martin goes through the diary to find out what was going on. We discover that this convent were monster hunters like Jean-Marie, and in fact this is in some way a warning of what you might become. Look into the abyss. Does the abyss look back into you? This convent, they were a group of monster hunters, and they themselves had been consumed by the monsters that they had hunted. The Mother Superior had been cursed to become the Wendigo, and once under that curse, instead of finding a way to free herself, she found a way to support herself and corrupt her followers. What is ahead for Jean-Marie? So this session ended very powerfully. There's something for everyone. There's character development, there's action, there's intrigue, there are chases and escapes, and momentous decisions. So again, another very cool opportunity for me to play this game that I've wanted to play for very, very long with another excellent game master, and looking forward to doing so again the next time with Ivan. Above and beyond getting to play the game, one of the cool things for me is being able to see how each of us takes the setting, takes the rules, takes the characters, and turns that into grist to grind out the bread of a session. Like, what is it that we're going to be tearing into? What will be our meal? And so Francois, he really showed a lot of care, I think, in who these characters are. I think he went back and watched all the sessions and went through the character sheets to find things which were legitimate hooks, things to pull on us, things to make us think about our characters, and to demonstrate who our characters are, who they've been, and who they're becoming. Plus, pitting us against a real challenge. Also, as a bonus, we get to rescue Briscourt, which is something we can tease him about for the rest of the campaign. Awesome. So, Francois gave us this world where Paris is full of the best and the brightest, and a world of change, but also a world of filth, and a world underneath there is this supernatural horror, this veneer over, like behind the walls of this convent, horror. In the eyes of the cardinal, discouragement or disapproval. Hidden in the natural world, hidden in the world that mankind has fashioned for itself, hidden all around us, there is this sense of fear. Nothing is what we think it is. The thief who steals the item, using guile and deception, is a fighter. And the scared member of a convent who's clearly being controlled by superior force and needs to be rescued is actually in on the plot and is lying to you the whole time, and you bit into it, hook, line, and sinker. This was the world of All for One that Francois gave to us, tying into the way that I tried to portray the world and connecting to the way that Sebastian tried to portray the world. And there were obvious links to what had gone before and an obvious stamp of his own personality. So I really, really enjoyed being able to play with the other three, and that's, I guess, the last gift that this 4GM experiment gives to us, is that each of us gets to play with all of the others. It's just a rare opportunity that I haven't seen since I was a kid. So this pretty much brings about the end of this recap. Now, one other thing, just to round out this video, that has happened in the interim is I ran a one-on-one session with Sebastian for Jean-Marie, and there is talk afoot, or I at least have plans to try and do this with each of the game masters after they run their games to give them an opportunity to round out who their character is as a character. So there may be more of that. So if you're curious about what happened to Jean-Marie during the time that the rest of us were at the front, you can find that video called All in a Night's Work on my channel. So if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. I hope you've been enjoying this exploration of 4 different game masters with the Ubiquity system using All for One by Triple Ace Games, because we certainly have.